Pittsburgh, 1996. Jamie is seen working in an electronics store, talking and flirting with women of all ages, convincing them to buy phones and stereos. While flirting with the store owner's girlfriend, Christy, Jamie and Christy sneak into the back to have sex. However, she accidentally calls her boyfriend on the intercom phone, and he hears everything. After getting punched in the face by his boss, Jamie runs out of the store, stopping to flirt with a woman named Amber on his way out. Later that night, Jamie is at his parents' house for dinner. His father and sister are doctors, while his bumbling brother, Josh, is rich from owning a medical software company. At dinner, Josh and his wife argue, and he brings up Jamie getting fired. The family criticizes Jamie for dropping out of med school, but he brushes them off and announces that Josh is going to help him get set up as a pharmaceutical sales rep. With Josh's help, Jamie goes to work for Pfizer. After attending several seminar classes, he begins practicing his sales pitch, trying to get doctors to prescribe Zoloft and Zithromax. However, he is constantly rebuffed by doctors, much to the dismay of his business partner and supervisor, Bruce, who sees Jamie as his ticket to a promotion in Chicago, where he can be near his wife and kids. Bruce tells Jamie that if he can get Dr. Knight to prescribe Zoloft instead of Prozac, all the other doctors will follow suit. After unsuccessfully trying to chat up Dr. Knight several times, Jamie flirts with his receptionists and sneaks into the back medicine cabinets, stealing all the Prozac samples and throwing them in the dumpster. Over the next few days, Jamie is still unable to increase his sales. He eventually bribes Dr. Knight with $1,000 to let him shadow him. The doctor accepts, and Jamie spends the day babbling about how Zoloft is better than Prozac. While shadowing Dr. Knight, Jamie meets Maggie, a 26-year-old woman diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease. Maggie tells Jamie that someone broke into her house and stole all her medication, handing him a long list of refills she needs. While there, Maggie asks Dr. Knight to check out a weird lump on her breast, which turns out to be a spider bite. Jamie looks on. Later, in the parking lot, Maggie catches Jamie throwing away the Prozac samples he stole from Dr. Knight's office. She punches him in the face for pretending to be an intern and for looking at her breast. She then takes his picture with an instant camera and leaves. That night, Jamie comes home to find Josh, who has split from his wife and wants to stay with him for a few weeks while he finds a place to live. Jamie then calls Dr. Knight's receptionist, whom he is sleeping with, and gets Maggie's address and phone number. Jamie calls Maggie and asks her out for coffee. At first, she refuses, but then she gives in and meets him. Their date consists of Jamie being charming while Maggie is rude. After just 10 minutes, they head back to her apartment and have very casual sex. Afterwards, she immediately kicks him out. A montage follows, showing Jamie receiving booty calls and him and Maggie having sex everywhere whenever she calls. One night, Maggie even shows up at Jamie's apartment, stark naked under a coat, only to be seen by his brother Josh, who is sleeping on the living room couch. Later, at work, Jamie is throwing away Prozac pills in a parking lot dumpster when he gets punched in the face by Trey, the hot-tempered rep for Prozac. Trey, the top seller in the region, gives doctors and staff big kickbacks, trips to Florida and Hawaii for pushing Prozac. He warns Jamie that he knows what he is doing and will take him down if he doesn't stop. Jamie gets takeout food and goes to see Maggie at her downtown loft. They briefly discuss Trey, who is married but was seeing her on the side, and Maggie's Parkinson's. She is a waitress at a small coffee shop and has no health insurance. As they start to have sex, Jamie is unable to get an erection. After a few kind words from Maggie, they simply hang out, and she teases him that he should try the new erectile dysfunction drug his company is developing. The next day, before Jamie leaves, Maggie experiences tremors in her left hand, which she hides from him as she pushes him out the door. Jamie approaches Bruce about the new drug, and Bruce says he will look into it. Later, Jamie gets the green light to sell Viagra, and suddenly, he becomes extremely popular among doctors. Back at his apartment, Jamie and Maggie talk. He tries to convince her to have a real relationship with him, but she refuses and leaves. The next day, Maggie is helping senior citizens onto a bus to Canada to buy cheaper prescription drugs when Jamie shows up. They argue about their relationship, and she leaves. Jamie, however, waits in the parking lot for her to return. When the bus finally comes back the next day, Maggie is touched that he waited for over 24 hours. She agrees to a relationship, but jokes that she gets to hate him and badmouth him to her girlfriends when he eventually dumps her. After another night of passionate sex, Maggie talks about how she used to be a painter, but since her Parkinson's diagnosis, she has switched to photography and collages. Jamie reveals that he dropped out of med school due to having attention deficit disorder. One night, after networking at a bar, Jamie comes home and starts to mess around with Maggie. However, he suddenly hyperventilates and confesses that he loves her. She is the first person he has ever told that to. A few days later, Bruce and Jamie discuss an upcoming conference in Chicago. Jamie hesitates, not wanting to leave Maggie because of her illness. When Jamie comes home, he finds Maggie drunk. Earlier, she had realized that she ran out of meds and couldn't get a refill in time due to the long wait at the clinic. They fight, and Jamie leaves. After he walks out, Maggie breaks down, crying and throwing her glass against the wall, unable to stop the tremors in her left hand. Jamie eventually returns, holds her, and they make up. Jamie asks Maggie to go to the conference with him. She agrees, and, while there, is invited by a woman to a Parkinson's convention across the street. She is moved by the stories of elderly and middle-aged people dealing with the disease. She texts Jamie to come join her. At the refreshment table, Jamie meets a middle-aged man whose wife is in the final stages of the disease. When Jamie asks for advice, the man tells him to run, to leave Maggie, as being in a relationship with someone with an incurable disease will lead to heartbreak and financial ruin. This shakes Jamie. After the convention, Maggie tells Jamie how much she loves him and how happy she is that she found the Parkinson's community. Meanwhile, Jamie is barely able to hide his insecurity. A montage follows, showing Jamie obsessively researching Parkinson's disease. He begins taking Maggie to specialists and seminars across the country, paying for her tests and maxing out his credit cards on hotel rooms and airfare. In Boston, when their appointment with a specialist gets rescheduled, Jamie angrily argues with the receptionist. Maggie walks out and Jamie follows. They fight, and Maggie tells him there is no cure. She says she isn't having fun anymore, and they break up against Jamie's wishes. Jamie spirals into depression. Dr. Knight convinces him to attend a party where he takes Viagra and has a threesome. The next morning, he experiences a painful reaction to the drug. On the way to the ER, Josh tells Jamie that he envies him less and is going back to his wife. Later, Jamie runs into Maggie, who is on a date. They have an awkward exchange. Bruce arrives and tells Jamie he's been promoted to the Chicago office, but Maggie quickly leaves. Jamie realizes he still loves Maggie. He chases down the bus she took to Canada, professing his love at a rest stop. They reconcile. The final scene shows them living together, with Jamie studying for medical school. His voiceover urges viewers to live every day to the fullest and follow their dreams. Thank you for watching, and see you again in another movie story.